Hello and welcome to the Lost Confederacy channel. This is week 12 of the 13-week fiscal program of recovery for American prisoners of war. As always, you have myself, Chief Biko, Chief Alligator, as well as Chief Quietwater. And here, as always, we focus on that first letter in the acronym APOW, which is American. Before we start off today with the readings, as well as the inventor, we're going to jump into that 1968 bill signing with Lyndon B. Johnson. Again, just to further explain and continue to, be repetitive, continue to show this for the people of how they like to use certain language, certain propaganda, make proclamations in regards to what these acts or who these acts refer to, when in actuality, these acts don't have any language that is specific to our group. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and play that video and then we'll jump into these readings.
Even while President Johnson talked to Chancellor Klaus about America's responsibility in a time of crisis and challenge, word came from Capitol Hill that Congress had passed and sent to the White House the Civil Rights Act of 1968. Included in the measure was a landmark open housing bill, which, when fully effective, would forbid discrimination in approximately 80% of all housing offered for rent or for sale in the United States.
I do not exaggerate when I say that the proudest moments of my presidency have been times such as this, when I have signed into law the promises of a century. I shall never forget that it is more than 100 years ago when Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. But it was a proclamation. It was not a fact. And in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, we affirmed through law that men equal under God are also equal when they seek a job, when they go to get a meal in a restaurant, or when they seek lodging for the night in any state in the Union. And now the Negro families no longer suffer the humiliation of being turned away because of their race. In the Civil Rights Act of 1965, we affirmed through law for every citizen in this land the most basic right of democracy, the right of a citizen to vote in an election in his country. In the 5 states where the act had its greater impact, Negro voter registration has already more than doubled. Now with this bill, the voice of justice speaks again. It proclaims that fair housing for all human beings who live in this country is now a part of the American way of life. We all know that the roots of injustice run deep, but violence cannot redress a solitary wrong or remedy a single unfairness. And we just must put our shoulders together and put a stop to both. The time is here. Action must be now.
Right. So it's stated in that video, again, this is probably like the 3rd or 4th week we've played it, how they'll state or specifically address the Negro within these public domains whenever they're facing their media or any type of news outlet. They'll specifically mention the Negro, but when it comes to the documents that same mention or that specificity is not within these documents. So that's exactly what we're highlighting while we're going through the Civil Rights Act and what we've been highlighting throughout this whole channel. There's been nothing specific to our group of people mentioned within any of these documents. Without further ado, though, we'll jump into the readings, and Chief Quietwater will present the inventor for this week.
All right. Good evening, everybody. 1 second. Okay, so tonight I am doing Otis F. Boykin, and he invented the electrical resistance element. The patent number is 3304199. The patent date is February 14th, 1967. So basically the resistor design enabled the regulation of electrical current within a circuit. It's basically found that this element is found in everything from like TVs to smartphones. And Otis Boykin, he holds like 12 US patents related to the resistors and similar electronic components. He was born in Dallas, Texas, August 29th, 1920, died March 26, 1982 in Chicago, Illinois. So that is the inventor for this week.
Great inventor. So basically, he's who we have to contribute to just having things running electrically.
Right. Cell
of
phones, televisions, just a lot of those components that go in those devices.
Okay, no, that's
and I'm
great.
sure he doesn't, his family doesn't continuously get royalties from any of his inventions.
A great inventor for this week. That's going to lead us into our Dr. Woodson quote. And for this week, I went ahead and chose quote number 7. And quote number 7 reads, "The Negro has been assigned to the lowest drudgery as the sphere in which the masses must toil to make a living, and socially and politically the race has been generally proscribed. And as much as the transducers of the race have settled the matter in this fashion, they naturally oppose any effort to change this status." Basically, the reason why I chose this quote for this week is because I think there was an actual news article that came out last week as well that stated how they're pretty much opening the floodgates for immigrants, I believe from South America or Mexico, one of those two, but basically how ISIS will no longer be able to detain them. And we can, as far as this government, not we, but this US government can only detain them or do something for a limited amount of time without giving them access to this. So again, with that being the case, if we are already at a quote unquote minority status as a group, then we have other quote unquote minorities coming in without having to do any type of registration, things of that nature. Where is that going to put us even further as a group? If we're already at the lowest, and then we have another wave of people who are automatically going to take more jobs, own more businesses, come in neighborhoods.
More funds that are earmarked specifically for minorities, like housing and education.
Exactly. Everything that we're pretty much reading within these quote unquote civil rights acts. And again, there was nothing specific to the Negro, but we did see that it was based on race, color, national origin, etc. So just another example of how we are continues to be at this bottom tier when it comes to this government, and that we have seemed to do nothing to change that for the future or change that status, even though we are of this land. So I'll let you all kind of build or what you took away from that particular quote, and then we'll jump into the other readings, and then of course the Civil Rights Act.
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, it's just pushing us further down in regards to the status that we don't even have, to be honest with you, in regards to just letting people flood the gates to come over here and giving them everything they needed to get a head start on this land. So, we have to recognize that for ourselves.
Yeah, for me, I would just remind everybody how we even became the Negro, which isn't a thing. That's the whole point of us. Now that we're in the civil rights era, people weren't really understanding where we were going when we started with the treaties, which are the supreme law of the land. But now here we are in something that we all can relate to, which is our grandparents' heyday, which was the civil rights era. Negro does not exist. Negro only became a thing during the Indian Removal Act. And I think our people really have to understand that everybody that did not go into Oklahoma, right, and get tagged by the United States government military, and get placed up under a nation, you got branded otherwise, Negro, Black, colored. And it's important for you to do the research on your family tree so you can see when that transition took place. Everybody's story is going to be different, but a lot of us go back to the Dawes roll. And if your family does go back to the Dawes roll, you'll see that transition take place on the oldest census record for your family member. They'll go, of course, if you're on a Dawes roll, you'll be Cherokee by blood, Chickasaw by blood, Seminole by blood, whatever have you. But then you'll go on the United States government census record as Black, Negro, or colored. So it starts with your family. Once you understand through your family tree who you are, then you can look at the macro picture, which is what we're doing here. When we do this channel on Sundays, we're talking about us as a group. But this won't make sense until you look at your individual family and verify that you are American. Then it's going to hit different. But yeah, what we're showing right now is Negro is not a thing. It's not a people. Black is not a thing. It's not a people. So we're too smart today to still be walking around calling ourselves Black, Negro, and Afro-American. We're opening up the video showing you that the president of the United States said the Negro has now the right to eat. Well, where's that word Negro? Even more specifically for the lawyers out there and for the people that are highly domesticated among our group, why in this Voting Rights Act is it not citing to the 15th Amendment? The lie that we're told in school is the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment is for our group. So the 15th Amendment should have gave us the right to vote. So we should be reading something in this 1965 Voting Rights Act that specifically earmarks this group. Some language should be in here saying, hey, this group of people, the slaves that we did the 15th Amendment for and due to the Southern states, we're not going to see anything like that. So I'm going to stop right there on it. We're just really exposing this whole shit is bullshit.
Great point, because we will go ahead and highlight that 15th Amendment before we jump into this Civil Rights Act of 65, because like you said, it's pretty much supposed to correlate with this 1965 Civil Rights Act. Without further ado, we'll jump into the legal definitions and then keep it moving.
Okay. First legal definition, American, indigenous to America. Second definition, descendants, one who follows in the bloodline of an ancestor, either lineally or collaterally. Third definition, slavery, a situation in which one person has absolute power over the life, fortune, and liberty of another. Fourth definition, prisoner of war, a person, usually a soldier, who is captured by or surrenders to the enemy in wartime. Fifth definition, school, any institution at which instruction is given in a particular discipline. Sixth definition, education, an enlightening experience. Seventh definition, recovery, a return to a normal state of health, mind, or strength, the action or process of regaining possession of something stolen or lost. And the five historical maroon points was a person escaping slavery, seeking freedom, or breaking the law. Providing unity and a strong defense came first. Number 3, maroon leaders were first and foremost military figures. Number 4, maroons established guerrilla warfare, planting sharp sticks in thick grass. Number 5, maroons knew their enemy's language, defenses, and plans. I'll just, if we can build real quick on 3 and 5, y'all, 3 and 4. Well, really, yeah, 3 and 4. Maroon leaders were first and foremost military figures. I'm gonna keep beating on this. I was sharing with somebody earlier this week that we're the only group of people on planet Earth that do not have killers as our leaders. And I'm gonna say it just like that. Every other group of people has a killer as their leader. Biden is commander-in-chief, and he's also the president of the United States. So he can be a businessman as the president of the corporation, or he can be on some gangster shit and become the commander-in-chief, which is over the military. When you look at the leaders in Korea, they are military officers. When they come out and speak, they have their killers on display in alignment, marching, displaying arms. Same thing with China, same thing with any nation in Africa. We are the only group of people that have nonprofit organization, college graduate, domesticated niggas who ain't never been outside, who sit in cubicles all day as our leaders. Or we have religious people with religious books in their hand as our leaders. We're out of alignment with nature. I want to throw that in on 3 because we really got to get honest with that. Everybody else has killers as their leaders, but us. At this point, we have no leaders. And then number 4, Maroons established guerrilla warfare. Look at every war since the Vietnam War. How did the Vietnamese beat the United States government military? Guerrilla warfare. How did the Iraqis beat the United States government military? Guerrilla warfare. How did Afghanistan beat the United States government military? Guerrilla warfare. We started this shit. We act like we need to recover and remember who the fuck we are. I'm gonna stop right now.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I don't know where the concept came in that you would ever win a war peacefully. It doesn't make sense.
It's a contradiction in itself.
Right.
Yeah, contradiction in itself, but no, excellent points too. Excellent points. And like you said, we have to continue to reiterate these points until it clicks for our group, especially the men of our group. This has nothing to do with the women. This has to do with the men. We have to be men. Stop making excuses and do what is necessary. It is our duty to make sure that we can, again, have that self-preservation. If they are already wiping us out and you're still trying to go within this system, what other choice do you have but to fight? And as Chief Alligator stated, Chief Quietwater stated, we have to put on our big boy pants and say, you know what, enough is enough. You take one of us, we got to take 2 of y'all. And that's just the time we got to be on. I mean, as you say, with those examples, I mean, shit, perfect examples. Wear your business hat on one end and wear your goddamn street hat on another. And it has to be that way. And it's not anything abnormal because, as he highlighted, examples of nations that their leaders do the same exact thing. Run business on one end, commander-in-chief on another end. So again, it seems like we are the only group that has an issue with that, always makes excuses when people do decide to rise up and say, okay, we need to be on that time. And now we have an excuse for, oh, they're this, they're that. Oh, they're a plant, they're this, they're that. Now they're a plant, but again, won't harp on that too much, but we'll continue to read these Maroon historical points, read off these documents, and as you'll see, it's going to be a common trend in regards to how things get done and what is actually natural or in alignment with nature. And with that, also wanted to kind of bring up another point just to make sure we do not forget this, because again, we do suffer from short-term memory loss. But I definitely wanted to highlight this section in Article 1, Section 10, that no state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, grant letters of marque and reprisal, coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. As some of you may have noticed, I believe it was probably last Sunday or either last Saturday, a particular bank closing. They had a meeting with the Federal Reserve Board, I want to say on Monday, pretty much an emergency meeting the next day, discussing how they were going to combat this. And what we're seeing here, what we're highlighting within their policy and procedures, how they're supposed to operate this business known as the United States Corporation. And it states here that the only thing as far as payment of debt is gold and silver. So when we see these banks closing and we know they no longer use or it's no longer backed by gold and silver, now we start to understand, okay, they've really been not only bullshitting our group, but pretty much everybody. Everybody's in this matrix, this make-believe world, this monopoly world, playing with monopoly money. And now people are confused when this fiat is exposed as not being real money. And it's clear as day when it comes to this section here on what actually is money or what is actual tender for payment of debts. Anybody kind of want to build on that? I'm gonna pull up some images as well.
It doesn't get exhausting, but we've been beating this horse working on 2 years. For weeks at a time, fiscal quarters at a time. We'll read Article 1, Section 10. None of this surprises me because I'm prepared. I'm sure hopefully everybody that's on this channel is prepared. It's inevitable when you understand from a fiscal standpoint, what happened in 2020 had never happened in United States government history. It never gave checks to every citizen ever. That ought to have been the first indicator to people with common sense. Wait a minute, how can there be money and everybody got it? I'm talking about whether you in prison or you an illegal citizen. If they got your social, you got a check, you know, assuming that you made less than whatever the threshold was. So yeah, there's going to be repercussions for all of that. And this is natural law, gold and silver coin, just like we were referring to the maroon historical points about your leader must be a killer, you know, in alignment with the king of the jungle, the lion. That male lion can't protect cubs and the woman and reproduce with the lioness in the pride. If any male lion can walk up in his territory and kill one of his cubs or run up on one of his women, that's just nature. So us as men, when we let other groups of men run up on our kids and kill them, run up on our women and kill them, lions ain't gonna walk in a circle growling at the sky. That's the equivalent of what we doing, talking about no justice, no peace. So it's the same thing with this gold and silver coin is a payment of tender and debts. Like, I don't know what else to say to y'all. Like, if you don't have gold and silver coin at this point, and I'm gonna go grab some and I can show real quick while you build Chief Quietwater and while you build Chief Biko. But we put the link in every description on every video, sdbullion.com. We suggest that website because you can go to the website and you can look at the history of when money was taken out the system. You can learn everything about what real money is versus what fiat is. We giving you the information, but we can't make you read it. I'm gonna stop right there.
No, I totally agree. We have to wake up as a people, as a whole. You know, it gets to the point where we want to take care of our family and, you know, and just keep it in-house, but it's the masses of us that need this information. And in order for us to move our group forward, it's going to have to be more than a handful of people to make these changes, to educate and to go back to, like Chief Alligator said earlier, in regards to knowing our family history and our family tree. Because if you really don't know where you came from, who you were, who your family was, and knowing that 9.99%, you know, 9 out of 10, they were not slaves and they did fight and they didn't move west, then you'll know that you have something to fight for. So that's the way I look at it. Oh, you muted.
My bad. But yeah, just to piggyback off of you, just for those that didn't catch our other build with showing the difference between a silver or $5 silver certificate from prior to 1971, whenever the gold was taken out, even earlier than that, you'll see how even the verbiage is different on the fiat. So as we can see here, this certifies that their is there is on deposit in the Treasury. Hold on, let me do that. Move this out the way. Of the United States of America, $5 in silver payable to the bearer on demand. Now, if anybody has a $5 bill, $1 bill, $20 bill, anything of that nature on them, you can look at that piece of paper, that fiat that you have now, and I guarantee it's not going to say that verbiage. I'm actually going to stop sharing real quick. So, Chief Alligator, as he's highlighting what actual payable tender is to underneath this government, which is silver.
Right. This is 6 ounces of silver. Each coin is 1 ounce. All right. So the reality is, if you understand the Constitution, if you can read and comprehend and you understand gold or silver coin is the only thing that can pay for debt, then why would you not have gold as a reserve? And then why would you also not have silver coin as a reserve? Because silver coin is what you would use on day-to-day business transactions. It's common sense, it's street smarts. Your gold is what you would sit on for big purchases. Your silver coins is what you would use for smaller purchases, grocery store, gas, things like that. This is 10 ounces of silver coin. Like I said, we put the website in every description. We giving y'all the game. You know, niggas will say the game is to be sold, not told. I disagree with niggas. I say the game is to be, you give the game away. It's up to the individual to study, to show themselves, approve, and apply themselves. There's no hustle to our freedom. So all niggas and nigga culture, you know, that's a word that I like to use. They like to say the game is to be sold, not told. I disagree with that. Lay the tools in front of a man's feet or a woman's feet. It's up to her to study, to show herself approved, but she can't say you didn't tell her.
Facts. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump back into these 1965 civil rights readings. But first and foremost, I definitely want to again just highlight what this 15th Amendment is supposed to have given our group of people. Because as Chief Alligator stated earlier, through our military brainwashing camps called schools, we were taught that the 13th through 15th Amendment applied to us, the newly freed slaves, as they call. So let's actually go ahead and see when these dates, or when they actually ratified some of these dates. So we have the 13th Amendment, December 6, 1865. We have the 14th Amendment, July 9th, 1868. And then last but not least, we have the 15th Amendment, February 3rd, 1870. And what this 15th Amendment reads is the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. And Section 2 reads the Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So again, just questions we have to ask ourselves, just common sense questions, critical thinking questions. If these amendments apply to us, and this amendment in particular, this 15th Amendment, is stating that the rights of the U.S. citizen to vote shall not be denied or abridged, yet we have a 1965 Civil Rights Act that is now supposedly giving us the right to vote. Were we the slaves that were freed during this whole 13th through 15th Amendment, this whole Reconstruction era? Were we those slaves, and were we citizens under this United States government after these amendments were established or ratified? Just critical thinking questions, because if that is the case, then there would be no need for any of these 1960 Civil Rights Acts. Just plain and simple. So understanding that, let's continue to build within this Civil Rights Act. And I believe last time we left off was on Section 9. Did we have anybody that wanted to start us off? We'll jump into this check real quick.
Yeah, before we take off real quick, you want to do it, Chief Firewater, or?
Do what?
Okay, yeah, I'll start the bill at I'll take off at Section 9. And just a reminder for those that'll listen to this video, we want to remind you that before the government did this Voting Rights Act, Malcolm X was killed. in Selma, Alabama, which is known as Bloody Sunday, had taken place.
Mhm.
So we want you to be clear of what happened before the United States government gave the world to right to vote. They didn't give the Negro the right to vote. They allowed the world the right to vote because the world saw, based on TV, multiple people get killed in Selma, Alabama on Bloody Sunday. So let's not forget that. We're staying in chronological order.
Mhm.
Selma, Alabama has already happened. Malcolm X is dead. Now the government is doing the Voting Rights Act.
And want to give the dates too for those. That way we can, like you stated, be in chronological order. So Malcolm X died or was killed February 21st, 1965. We have Bloody Sunday a whole month later, March 31st, 1965. And then we have this Civil Rights Act that is going to be ratified August of that same year. So again, just making sure we're seeing that timeline within the same year, and then keeping that in the back of our minds as we read through these documents too. Go
Yep.
ahead, Ed.
And keep in mind the riots that were taking place after X and Selma, Alabama. So it had to be a whole lot of shit starting to get to this point. Section 9, any challenge to a listing on an eligibility list prepared by an examiner shall be heard and determined by a hearing officer appointed by and responsible to the Civil Service Commission, and under such rules as the commission shall by regulation prescribe. Such challenge shall be entered only if filed at such office within the state as the Civil Service Commission shall by regulation designate. And within 10 days after the listing of the challenged person is made available for public inspection, and if supported by 1, the affidavits of at least 2 persons having personal knowledge of the facts constituting grounds for the challenge, and 2, a certification that a copy of the challenge and affidavits have been served by mail or in person upon the person challenged at his place of residence set out in the application. Such challenge shall be determined within 15 days after it has been filed. A petition for review of the decision of the hearing officer may be filed in the United States Court of Appeals for the circuit in which the person challenged resides within 15 days after service of such decision by mail on the person petitioning for review, but no decision of a hearing officer shall be reversed unless clearly erroneous. Any person listed shall be entitled and allowed to vote pending final determination by the hearing officer and by the court. So Section 9 is talking procedure when it comes to the examiner and the Civil Service Commission. It's requiring you that you got to have 2 people, and you got to do an affidavit, which is a statement of fact. It's telling you the 15-day allotment for correspondence, and then the appeal. But then that last sentence basically tells you this whole procedure is bullshit because it tells you that where it says by mail on the person petitioning for review, but no decision of a hearing officer shall be reversed unless clearly erroneous. So you can go through that whole process, and it's up to them to determine whether or not that examiner decision was clearly erroneous. So it's all a waste of time. That's what I'm taking from Section 9.
Yeah, it's like you go through the whole the whole process. Really, at the end of the day, the hearing officer has the say so.
Mhm.
Basically.
I agree. Yeah, the hearing officer has that final say. And again, we got to ask ourselves, who was this hearing officer?
Mm.
An American, or was it a U.S. citizen? More than likely the latter.
And how hard is it to get 2 other people to join you on your affidavit? I mean, just look at where you are now. You know, how hard would it be to get 2 people to join you on an affidavit to go through a procedure with anything? You know, I'm going back to nigger culture. We have American culture and nigger culture. Nigger culture is getting promoted through TV and the music right now. Nigger culture is just does not handle business at all, right? It's hard to get niggers to do anything constructive.
Right.
That's where I'm at with that one. I'll do subsection B. The times, places, procedures, and form for application and listing pursuant to this act and removals from the eligibility list shall be prescribed by regulations promulgated by the Civil Service Commission, and the commission shall, after consultation with the Attorney General, instruct examiners concerning applicable state law, not inconsistent with the Constitution and laws of the United States with respect to the qualifications required for listing and loss of eligibility to vote. Upon the request of the applicant or the challenger, or on its own motion, the Civil Service Commission shall have the power to require by subpoena the attendance and testimony of witnesses and the production of documentary evidence relating to any matter pending before it under the authority of this section. In case of contumacy or refusal to obey a subpoena, any district court of the United States or the United States court of any territory or possession, or the district court of the United States for the District of Columbia, within the district of which said person guilty of contumacy or refusal to obey is found or resides or is domiciled or transacts business or has appointed an agent for receipt of service of process upon application by the Attorney General of the United States, shall have jurisdiction to issue to such person an order requiring such person to appear before the commission or a hearing officer. I'm gonna stop right there because they love run-on sentences. Scroll back up to that part that I just started reading real quick, just to make sure everybody's in order with me. Upon the request of the applicant or the challenger or on its own motion, the civil service can get the ball rolling, or the applicant can get the ball rolling about his right to vote. Right, shall have the power to require by subpoena the attendance and testimony of witnesses. Again, assuming that people in 1965 were going to support you and go through this process if they denied you the right to vote. So this is everything that would have to happen, right? They're telling you if you refuse to obey the subpoena, you know, and that the district court or the United States court or any territory or possession or district court of the United States for the District of Columbia within the jurisdiction of which said person guilty or refusal to obey is found or resides. So you got 3 different court jurisdictions that you're dealing with. We talked about that before. A lot of times we walk into these court jurisdictions and we don't know what playbook they're playing out of. Are they playing with the state codes, which is at the state level? Are they playing with law, which would be constitution? Or are they playing with municipalities and ordinances? You understand? Or is it a commonwealth state? So all of these things that Dr. Carter G. Woodson tells us about our predicament, you know, ignorance of the law is no excuse. We got to know, are we playing Madden? Are we playing Super Mario Brothers? Are we playing Tecmo Bowl? Are we playing NBA 2K? This shit ain't hard. It's just how you process it in your mind. What game am I playing? What rules do I need to go by? Y'all want to share anything?
Yeah, that's definitely facts, because the simple fact that we get in these situations, I mean, we don't know where to begin. I think that's what it all comes down to. And I think that it just continues to go back to the fact that we don't know. And we have to get all on the same page of knowing and learning, you know, the playbook. That's what they've done in all of these different documents that we've read. All of their plays have been strategically written. I mean, even though within the document they're contradicting themselves, but at the end of the day, their goal was achieved and we fell for it. We got to do the same thing.
Definitely agree. And I love the analogy too with the game system. Just think of it as, you know, this government, this United States government, the system is, let's compare it to a PlayStation. So within PlayStation, you're going to have different games, like you stated. You got your Madden, you got your 2K, et cetera, et cetera. Now, those games going to have certain rules that you have to play by, but the overall system, you still have to press X to get this action. So it seems like once we understand a particular system or the system as a whole, then we can go ahead and see, okay, start seeing similarities within each game, i.e. your different court systems. So your district courts, your Supreme Courts, your county courts, your different municipalities, you'll start to see, okay, a lot of this shit is the same because they're going to use pretty much the same structure. They're just going to tweak certain things to be specific to that particular state in this example game. So like you stated, if we can understand the big picture of things at a macro level and then start to, okay, so if I'm in Georgia, let me go ahead and make sure I understand everything that Georgia has as far as its systems, breaking it down. And then we can go from there. So now that's a great example of that, because what you'll see, especially when working in different fields, especially underneath this government, you start to see that they use a lot of the same structure. Now, of course, what the role, not necessarily the role, but what they're achieving or their goal for that structure may be different, but a lot of the same roles will be the same. So your commissioners for one thing will be pretty much the same as a commissioner for another industry, and vice versa. So now I thought that was a great example.
All right, I'm gonna pick up. There to produce pertinent, relative, and non-privileged documentary evidence, if so ordered, or there to give testimony touching the matter under investigation, and any failure to obey such order of the court may be punished by said court as a contempt thereof. So all of that's just procedure if you're denied the right to vote. What you got to do, the different courts that can get involved, that's basically what all Section 9 is talking about. Section 10. And just to throw in about our women, y'all know systems, because when y'all get around each other, y'all break down Department of Human Resources system. Y'all know systems. It's just that y'all are applying the skill set y'all have, you're just not applying it to the right things. Like when it comes to making sure your kids straight and what you can get from the state, which takes the place of us majority of the times, right after this happens is when the state comes in. Now that you are a quasi-citizen, we're going to build on that later. Once the state gives us quasi-citizenship, the state then in the late 60s, early 70s comes to our women and says, you don't need the man, let the state be daddy. Mm-hmm. That's when it starts, because you weren't the citizen before then. And so then this is where the internal battle starts in the 70s. You know, you start getting the women that start going under housing and different things like that, not realizing that this same system, you know, was destroying our towns, destroying our businesses, and then turning around, not hiring the men. But again, going back to natural law, if that lion is not king of the jungle, the woman is going to follow the strongest lion, regardless of his color. That lion could be white. Women are going to follow security. So the women went with the states. So the state plays daddy. And a lot of us don't get that when we have kids and we're talking about legal rights. You're claiming your child from the state because both man and woman fucked up in the hospital when you signed the birth certificate. You gave vital statistics rights and you give that state rights after 6 months once they get issued a child support, social security card. I'm sorry. Let me stop because I don't want to. We can go into that. But again, it's a game. And our women, it's almost like you can't cry spilt milk when you danced with the devil. And it's no disrespect to our women because we all on the same team, but you got to admit they played you. When you ran with the state, that's the worst thing that could have happened because it's an inheritance law. When you let the state play daddy for 18 years and only get child support, what you also understand is that daddy is not the legal father. So that child cannot inherit. So you're playing a short game, women. You're getting 18 years of child support, but when the father dies, probate court gets anything that child's supposed to inherit because the state is going to offset everything they gave you for them 18 years. Let me stop. Somebody else want to pick up? Let me stop.
Are we on section 10? Okay. The Congress finds that the requirement of the payment of a poll tax as a precondition to voting precludes persons of limited means from voting or imposes unreasonable financial hardship upon such persons as a precondition to their exercise of the franchise, does not bear a reasonable relationship to any legitimate state interest in the conduct of elections. In some areas has the purpose or effect of denying persons the right to vote because of race or color. Upon the basis of these findings, Congress declares that the constitutional right of citizens to vote is denied or abridged in some areas by the requirement of the payment of a poll tax as a precondition to voting. So basically, this is just going over all the restrictions or the roadblocks that they put up for, so that people can be able to vote. In the exercise of the powers of Congress under Section 5 of the 14th Amendment and Section 2 of the 15th Amendment, the Attorney General is authorized and directed to institute forthwith in the name of the United States such actions, including actions against state or political subdivisions for declaratory judgment or injunction relief against the enforcement of any requirement of the payment of a poll tax as a precondition to voting, or substitute thereafter enacted after November the 1st, 1964, as will be necessary to implement the declaration of subsection A and the purposes of this section. Kind of just going through the standard procedure. The district courts of the United States shall have jurisdiction of such actions, which shall be heard and determined by a court of 3 judges in accordance with provisions of Section 2284 of Title 28 of the United States Code, and any appeal shall lie to the Supreme Court. It shall be the duty of the judges designated to hear the case, to assign the case for hearing at the earliest practicable date, and to participate in the hearing and determination thereof, and to cause the case to be in every way expedited.
Okay.
So,
Well, shoot, I was gonna say, definitely that section A and B was highlighting specifically those amendments, especially section B, referring to that 15th Amendment, basically telling that Congress will have the right to enforce these enforce that amendment. So I guess they're saying that, okay, now this is that enforcement act, Civil Rights Act.
got you. That makes sense. Which really, at the end of the day, really don't mean anything, but
Correct.
okay. Is it D? Am I on D?
Yeah, we're on D.
Okay. During the pendency of such actions and thereafter, if the courts, notwithstanding this action by the Congress should declare the requirement of the payment of a poll tax to be constitutional, no citizen of the United States who is a resident of a state or political subdivision with respect to determinations have been made under subsection 4B, and a declaratory judgment has not been entered under subsection 4A, during the first year, he becomes otherwise entitled to vote by reason of registration by state or local officials or listing by an examiner, shall be denied the right to vote for failure to pay a tax if he tenders payment of such tax for the current year to an examiner or to the appropriate state or local official at least 45 days prior to election, whether or not such tender would be timely or adequate under the state law. That was kind of a run-on sentence, but what is that saying?
So that's what I'm saying to me. I'll just scroll back up here. Basically how they'll enable or they'll allow certain states to actually implement a poll tax that wouldn't be unconstitutional, as long as I guess they're able to rectify or able to determine the benefit of said tax. Then it looks like they're listing up the procedures of what the person who failed to pay that, what they can do to still be able to vote within that year.
Yep. And keep in mind, that's also a way to generate extra income, because now they're marketing to the world that if you come be a citizen of our government, we got to account for you. They're going to account for you, and then they're going to make you pay a tax, a poll tax, in order to vote. What we have to understand, being the American, is if you're in that Jim Crow South, the same South where the undeclared Seminole Wars took place, you couldn't do everything that we're reading. You couldn't go through the court system if you lived in the South. So they're being very detailed what the world can do. The Negro who didn't go into Indian territory during the 1800s, you're going to get in the door by proxy. That's what we're showing. You don't see Negro, Black, and colored in these documents, because that first Civil Rights Act in 1964 was letting the world know, we're not going to Jim Crow. We're not going to ban you if you're melanated, if you become a citizen. They're marketing to the world. Now they're going a step further. After killing people in Selma, Alabama, after killing Malcolm X, and they're saying, okay, we're also going to give people around the world that want citizenship under this government the right to vote. They're not saying nothing about the Negro, nothing about your towns, Nothing about all the shit that they destroyed of yours that's underwater or been burnt down. They're not talking about none of that. They never repaired you. You just assimilated default. That's what we're trying to get through our people's head. Go ahead, Chief Whitewater.
Where did I leave off? Section 11. No person acting under color of law shall fail or refuse to permit any person to vote who is entitled to vote under any provision of this act or is otherwise qualified to vote, or willfully fail or refuse to tabulate, count, and report such person's vote. Okay. B, no person, whether acting under color of law or otherwise, shall intimidate, threaten, or coerce, or attempt to intimidate, threaten, or coerce any person for voting or attempting to vote, or intimidate, threaten, or coerce, or attempt to intimidate, threaten, or coerce any person for urging or aiding any person to vote or attempt to vote, or intimidate, threaten, or coerce any person for exercising any powers or duties under section 3A, 6, 8, 9, 10, or 12E.
Now, if you could highlight that first sentence in section B she just read. No person, whether acting under color of law. We don't need police, y'all. We don't need police. Police are color of law. They're not law. But here's the problem with us. They're not going to defund the police, because how do the attorneys and the district attorneys make their living? The police work for them.
Right.
We gotta understand the system.
Mm-hmm.
Our people have integrated into their bar, and it's to their benefit to have police. So that's why they play dumb as the murders continue. Listen to them. They'll say, you know, we don't know what's going on. They'll play dumb, but they're never going to defund police. Why? And the police know it. The police are saying, we waged a war on drugs since the 80s. You ain't had no problem with us locking up your own people for 30-something years. Now, all of a sudden, y'all got a problem. So it's an internal battle within that own system. I just wanted to point that out. Keep going.
But at the end of the day, definitely they're going to stick together. Even though it's the internal battle, it's still going to be the same. They're still going to be in unity with whatever it is that they're trying to do, unlike us.
I just want to highlight too, just that sentence, no person, whether acting under color of law, reads to me like no person, even if we know that, again, color of law is disguised as the law, but not actually law. So basically saying, yeah, even if they are disguising themselves as law, but they're not actually law, these people can't even threaten or can't even restrict you from voting. So they're admitting that color of law is not law, but
right,
still have to go through this process type of thing. So definitely wanted to highlight that.
Okay. Whoever knowingly or willfully gives false information as to his name, address, or period of residence in the voting district for the purpose of establishing his eligibility to register or vote, or conspires with another individual for the purpose of encouraging his false registration to vote or legally vote, or illegal voting, or pays or offers to pay or accept payment either for registration to vote or for voting, shall be fined not more than $10,000 or imprisoned not more than 5 years, or both. Provided, however, that this provision shall be applicable only to general, special, and primary elections held solely or electing any candidate for the office of president, vice president, presidential elector, member of the United States Senate, member of the United States House of Representatives, or delegates or commissioners from the territories or possessions or resident commissioners of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. So this is just basically showing what kind of fines will be imposed if there's any illegal voting taking place. Okay, so D, whoever in any matter within the jurisdiction of an examiner or hearing officer knowingly and willfully falsifies or conceals a material fact, or make any false, fictitious, or fraudulent statements or representations, or makes or uses any false writing or document knowing the same to contain any false, fictitious, or fraudulent statement or entry shall be fined not more than $10,000 or imprisoned not more than 5 years or both. Section 12, whoever shall deprive or attempt to deprive any person of any right secured by section 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, or 10, or shall violate section 11A or B, shall be fined not more than $5,000 or imprisoned not more than 5 years or both. And then section B.
Penalties. Yeah, all of this is just penalties.
Penalties. Okay. B, whoever within a year following an election in a political subdivision in which an examiner has been appointed, 1, destroys, defaces, mutilates, or otherwise alters the marking of a paper ballot which has been cast in such election, or 2, alters any official record of voting in such election tabulated from a voting machine, or otherwise shall be fined not more than $5,000 or imprisoned not more than 5 years or both. Okay, and then C, whoever conspires to violate the provisions of subsection A or B of this section or interferes with any right secured by section 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 10, or 11, A or B shall be fined no more than $5,000 or imprisoned for not more than 5 years or both. Again, just continuing with the violations. Section D, whenever any person has engaged or there are reasonable grounds to believe that any person is about to engage in any act or practice prohibited by section 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 10, 11, or subsection B of this section, the Attorney General may institute for the United States or in the name of the United States an action for preventive relief, including an application for a temporary or permanent injunction, restraining order, or other order, including an order directed to the state and state or local election officials to require them to 1, to permit persons listed under this act to vote, and 2, to count such votes.
Start right there right quick, because you keep saying persons. Just for the people that are following along, even though we're reading out penalties for either stopping somebody to vote or lying on the application about who you are to vote. Remember, when they use the word person under color of law, a person can be a dog. So in today's society, they always talk about big corporations being the overall manipulating factor of voting. We can understand how that happens because a corporation is a person. I just wanted to throw that in. Go ahead, Chief Quietwater.
Okay. Whenever in any political subdivision in which there are examiners appointed pursuant to this act, any persons alleged to such an examiner within 48 hours after the closing of the polls that notwithstanding 1, their listing under this act or registration by an appropriate election official, and 2, their eligibility to vote, they have not been permitted to vote in such election, the examiner shall forthwith notify the Attorney General if such elections, in his opinion, appear to be well-founded. Upon receipt of such notification, the Attorney General may forthwith file with the district court an application for an order providing for marking, casting, and counting of the ballots of such persons and requiring the inclusion of their votes in the total vote before the results of such election shall be deemed final and any force or effect given thereto. The district court shall hear and determine such matters immediately after the filing of such application. The remedy provided in this subsection shall not preclude any remedy available under state or federal law.
We just lived through that, y'all. Section E, which you just read, we just went through that with Trump and Biden's election, where you had attorney generals saying that the counts were not correct, and Donald Trump was saying his count was not correct. I think it's self-explanatory in 2023 that the media will tell you that Joe Biden got more votes than Obama. But if you use practical common sense, when Obama was running for president, we saw how long those lines were both times. You didn't have lines like that during the pandemic for Biden. Now, I don't have a dog in that fight. You know, I don't believe in picking the lesser of two evils, but that section you just read is exactly what we just lived through in 2020. Trump was saying the votes weren't counted properly. He called on his militia to show up in January 6, 2021 to stop the transfer of power. Biden is saying, hey, more people voted for me than Obama. We know with our own eyes that didn't happen. So we can see the bullshit, but again, we didn't really have a dog in that fight because since Biden been in office, he did nothing specific for you. But he told you if you ain't black, you don't vote. No, how did he say it? Yeah, you ain't black if you don't vote, right?
Yeah,
For-
you gotta vote
yeah.
for him. Yeah, for him specifically too.
So we understand intellectually what he's really saying. Black is not in law. We're reading the Voting Rights Act. So what he's really saying is, if you stupid enough to support me after my 1994 crime, after me weaponizing on Generation X and mass incarcerating you, right? And you see how we went for that?
Right. And Kamala Harris, her campaign was what, the Chucks and Pearls, like using something so menial of shoes and a necklace to garner votes.
Yeah.
And we fell for it. And she has not used black since she's been in office.
At all.
She identifies as what, Indian American?
As she should. She came out of
Right.
a woman's
Right,
lineage.
exactly.
Yeah, she knows her lineage.
She just used the language to, you know, get her AKAs and her black women to vote for her.
Used to be the culture to promote it.
You gonna pick up Chief Biko?
Yeah, I'll pick up. You trying to run through this? Or where we at with time? Hold on. All right. We at F. Okay. So I got F, the District Court of the United States shall have jurisdiction of proceedings instituted pursuant to this section and shall exercise the same without regard to whether a person asserting rights under the provisions of this act shall have exhausted any administrative or other remedies that may be provided by law. Section 13, listing procedures shall be terminated in any political subdivision of any state with respect to examiners appointed pursuant to Clause B of Section C or Section 6, whenever the Attorney General notifies the Civil Service Commission or whenever the District Court for the District of Columbia determines in an action for declaratory judgment brought by any political subdivision with respect to which the Director of the Census has determined that more than 50% of the non-white persons of voting age residing therein are registered to vote.
Stop right there. Hold on, stop right there. The non-white person. So who was the 15th Amendment initially for? This just further proves what we showed.
Yeah.
Who did the 15th Amendment initially apply to? It was the peasant that rebelled in the rebellious states.
Correct.
Because now they're being specific in Section 13 that this pertains to the non-white person.
Which is what? The world. Basically the world. No, good point out. Good point out. Number one, that all persons listed by an examiner for such subdivision have been placed on the appropriate voting registration roll. And two, that there is no longer reasonable cause to believe that persons will be deprived of or denied the right to vote on account of race or color, with such subdivision, and B, with respect to examiners appointed pursuant to Section 3. I'm gonna just stop right there because that just, again, further solidifies that point. So we here see that, again, non-white persons, then it double downs and says that, okay, on account of race or color, they cannot be deprived that right to vote. So again, as you stated, just further identifying who had the right to vote coming out of that Civil Rebellion, which was those newly freed white peasants. Let me see here. Upon order of the authorizing court, a political subdivision may petition the Attorney General for determination of listing procedures under Clause A of this section, and may petition the Attorney General to request the Director of the Census to take such survey or census as may be appropriate for the making of the determination provided for in this section. The District Court of the District of Columbia shall have jurisdiction to require such survey or census to be made by the Director of the Census, and it shall require him to do so if it deems the Attorney General's refusal to request such survey or census to be arbitrary or unreasonable.
So the closest thing we've seen so far is non-white person. You would have to imply that that refers to, if you're going to hold on to the badge of Negro, which is what this president said in 1968 when he referred to the 1964, 1965, and 1968 Civil Rights Act. Lyndon Baines Johnson called a particular group of people in America Negro. So we haven't seen Negro, and they're not using the word Black yet through the media. Just put a pin in that. That's why we're showing that video at the beginning. The president was calling us Negro during that time. We're going to see a shift by the time we hit the 70s. Nixon is going to start calling us Black through the benign and neglect policy, but we'll get there. Go ahead, Chief Biko.
So we got section 14. All cases of criminal contempt arising under the provisions of this act shall be governed by section 151 of the Civil Rights Act of 1957. Section B, no court other than the District Court of the District of Columbia or a court of appeals in any proceeding under section 9 shall have jurisdiction to issue any declaratory judgment pursuant to section 4 or section 5 of any restraining order or temporary or permanent injunction against the execution or enforcement of any provision of this act or any action of any federal officer or employee pursuant hereto. Section C1, the terms of vote or voting shall include all action necessary to make a vote effective in any primary, special, or general election, including but not limited to registration, listing pursuant to this act, or other action required by law, prerequisite to voting, casting a ballot, and having such ballot counted properly and included in the appropriate totals of votes cast with respect to candidates for public or party office and propositions for which votes are received in an election. So there's just given definition of the term vote or voting. Looks like it's going to be the same for 2 here. So subsection 2, the terms political subdivision shall mean any county or parish except that where registration for voting is not conducted under the supervision of a county or parish. The term shall include any other subdivision of a state which conducts registration for voting. So they're making a clear distinction between the political subdivision and what that means. So if it's a county or parish, it shall be included, but anything outside of that wouldn't be considered as far as the definition of political subdivision. Got subsection.
Which would make sense because you do have reservations and you have Indian territory. So you got different jurisdictions on the land. And don't forget, you got Mexico, which is its own government, and you got Canada, which is its own government. And then you got civilized tribes coming out of Oklahoma, and you got a couple of other recognized tribes in the southeast region of North America. So everything is not a political subdivision for the United States government's entity.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Makes sense. Subsection D, in any action for a declaratory judgment brought pursuant to section 4 or section 5 of this act, subpoenas for witnesses who are required to attend the district court or District of Columbia may be served in any judicial district of the United States, provided that no writ of subpoena shall issue for witnesses without the District of Columbia at a greater distance than 100 miles from the place of holding court without the permission of the district court for the District of Columbia being first had upon proper application and cause shown. So they're basically giving the limitations on how far they can call upon these witnesses if you want to go ahead and have them, I guess, be on your behalf when trying to declare your right to vote. Section 15, section 2004 of the revised statute as amended by Section 131 of the Civil Rights Act of 1957 and amended by Section 601 of the Civil Rights Act of 1960, and as further amended by Section 101 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, is further amended as follows. A, delete the word federal wherever it appears in subsection A and C, repeal subsection F and designate the present subsection G, H, F, and G respectively. Section 16, the Attorney General and the Secretary of Defense jointly shall make a full and complete study to determine whether under the laws or practices of any state or states there are preconditions to voting which might tend to result in discrimination against citizens serving in the armed forces of the United States seeking to vote. Such officials shall jointly make a report to the Congress not later than June 30th, 1966, containing the results of such study, together with a list of any states in which such preconditions exist, and shall include any such report, such recommendations for legislation as they deem advisable to prevent discrimination in voting against citizens serving in the armed forces of the United States.
Stop right there. That's critical. Everybody who has parents that were graduating high school in the 60s. I know my father came out 65. So that's the year that this act came out. What we got to remember is there was a Vietnam War going on and they were instituting the draft. So you see how the Secretary of Defense had to get involved in this subsection. Shall make a full and complete study to determine whether under the laws or practices of any state or states, there are preconditions to voting which might tend to result in discrimination against citizens serving in the armed forces of the United States seeking to vote. You can't ask them to fight for your, see, now that you're going to become a citizen, right? We can understand why that generation had a strong disdain against the United States government. If you graduated in the 60s, you lived through Jim Crow, pretty much 18 years old. Now this same government is telling you, you got to fight for me. Shout out to Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali was one of the ones that stood up during that time and said, I'm not finna fight for you. You just gave me the right to vote. You just Jim Crow. So you can see what was going on, how that was another way of attacking the men of our people, making them fight a war that they didn't, whether they wanted to or not, they were forced into it. Y'all want to build on that?
I definitely, I can tell my grandpa fought in the Korean War. So that's what, early 50s, 1950s. And like you stated, instituting drafts and things of that nature, but it's stating here that prior to this act, he didn't have a right to vote, yet he was forced to go overseas and fight for this country. So definitely something that his, home personally. So I know he had that, he would always wear that cap.
And let me ask you. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and then the unfortunate thing when they came home and reality hit them is that they've been hoodwinked and used to go over there and fight this country's battle. So I think that even though they wear their badges proudly and they are veterans, when they came home, it was a smack in the face, basically.
Yep. And let me ask y'all a question. And for people listening to this video, ask yourself a question. Did your family member fight for the country or for the government? And the reason why I'm asking that question is, remember, there's multiple governments in North America. There's Canada, there's Mexico. See, so the lie is through TV is fight for your country, but you're really fighting for the corporation, because if the corporation dissolve, Mexico may get larger jurisdiction in the land North America. Canada may get larger jurisdiction. So we got to get our, what's the word I'm looking for? Geography correct in our mind.
Yeah.
They'll say country like the United States government is all of North America. It's not.
Same with United States and America. They're the same things, but it's two different things. America is the landmass. United States is that, again, government structure. So not a great point. Great point there.
And the fact that most people don't even know that.
Yeah. Just a
You think so?
conversation was happened the other day too. It's like you never hear anybody say they're American Chinese or
I know so.
American
Yeah.
Mexican or
Right.
American Japanese. You know, it's always the opposite. So even that is like raises the question. So why don't people say that? You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's like everybody knows this is a fictitious government, or is it something even deeper than that?
We coming up on our last page?
We at page 9. Yeah, so page 10.
Okay, yeah, we'll go ahead and finish this last page, and then that way, go ahead.
So we got section 17. Nothing in this act shall be construed to deny, impair, or otherwise adversely affect the right to vote of any person registered to vote under the law of any state or political subdivision. Section 18, there are hereby authorized to be appropriated such sums as are necessary to carry out the provisions of this act. Section 19, if any provisions of this act or the application thereof to any person or circumstances is held invalid, the remainder of this act and the application of the provision to other persons not similarly situated or to other circumstances shall not be affected thereby. And this is signed by the Speaker of House, Vice President of the United States, and approved August 6th, 1965.
So does this mean it's legitimate law because Congress passed it?
Yes, underneath this
Yes.
government. Yeah.
Right.
All right. So this is the end of it. So now, how many people we got in the chat?
48.
Okay. So now it's time to ask some questions. And can you go ahead and do a control F? Can you do a control F on this document?
Not on this, but I do have it pulled up on the other one. Let me pull that up real quick.
Okay. We're going to ask some questions now that we finished the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Do control F for the word colored, Black, Negro, Afro-American.
So nothing for color. So let's see. This would be, I don't think this is within the document. Yeah, this is basically the summary. So they'll put Black within the summary, but when we look
But
at
not the actual document.
the transcript, we see it doesn't show anything.
Correct. We did not read the word Black in the actual lawful document, but what you're saying is in the summary, they do the bait and switch. They'll lie. Let's call it what it is. Okay.
African Americans,
Wow.
Wow.
Black voters.
That's crazy.
Yeah. That's
So-
why reading is fundamental. So now,
Mhm.
so let's go somewhere with everybody that you said. How many people in the chat, Chief Quietwater?
48, I think. Yeah,
Okay,
48.
let's go back to that original document, Chief Biko, because we can clearly see the 3-card Monty game that they're playing with us. And shout out to everybody that's been going along on this journey. So now what we know 100%, now that we look back at what the 1964 and 1965 Civil Rights Acts were about. There's 3 civil rights that took place. 64 ended Jim Crow and desegregated school. Those were the 2 things that we benefited from by default, but the word Negro, Black, and color were not specified in the 1964 Civil Rights Act. The 1965 Voting Rights Act is what we just read. It doesn't specifically state Negro, Black, or color. Again, so now these 2 documents, this 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, those were marketing acts for the world to come and be citizens. Your Jamaicans, your Haitians, your Bahamians, your Africans. You understand what I'm saying? Now, pull up the 1968 Civil Rights, pull up the 1968 Indian Rights Act that we're going to start on next Sunday. So now we can see the big picture and we can see what happened in the 60s. And it's very interesting why, quote unquote, scholars that look like us never explain this to us. They always show us MLK, Malcolm X, a couple of dogs biting us, but they never tell us that it was 3 specific civil rights acts and that the most important one that gets specific is going to be the one that refers to the Indian. Title II. It starts at Title II. Rights of the Indians. So we're going to get into this next Sunday. The whole act of 1968 that Lyndon Baines Johnson talks about refers to the Indian. So now let's ask ourselves a question, prisoners of war on the land. If the United States government did not do the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment for you, because the record shows that it actually did it for the peasant Europeans that were enslaved, that rebelled against their government, then they came back 100 years later in 1964 and ended the unlawful war or the intense military occupation called Jim Crow against the real American, then turned around in 1965 and gave a Voting Rights Act for the world to be able to become United States citizens. But then in 1968, it gets real specific and says rights of Indians. So we're going to read this document next week and see, do we rhyme with what happened to us based on this act? Anything y'all want to say?
I'm excited to know because, to read this, of course, I've never read it thoroughly before, and I just learned that it was the rights of Indians. Did not know that before. So I'm definitely excited to see what it all entails and see what everyone thinks about it and what feedback we get.
No, I'm excited too. Just doing a quick little Google search in the National Archives, where we just had the 1965 and I believe the 1964 Civil Rights Act, where we was dropping it in that chat or pinning it. I just went ahead and typed in 1968, and now they don't have a document for that.
Are you serious?
Really?
Now, yeah, they don't have it specifically anything for the 1968 within the National Archives. So
Wow.
Within the National Archive.
Y'all let me know if I'm seeing something different. Look, I got glasses on for a reason. Y'all so
wow.
Nah, I just typed in 68. Now we looking at 64. They mentioned 68, but again, nothing. They'll mention fair housing. Maybe that's what I need to do. Fair housing.
That's gonna tie right into fair housing, not jumping ahead, but we do want to show people, and shout out to everybody that's been rocking with us and that's been eating this elephant one bite at a time with us. We couldn't tell you before we got here. We've never been explained what really happened in the 60s. When you hear fair housing, that's the projects. That's the projects, y'all. So how did you all of a sudden get accepted into, why did the government start housing you? The 1968 Indian Rights Act, did you benefit from that with housing? So I'm not even concerned that they took it out of the National Archives, because game is up. Once we start reading this document, now we see a full picture of what happened in the 60s. First, they ended Jim Crow and integrated the schools. Then they turned around and gave the world, well, let me say it correctly. First, they told the world, you can send your people over here and you don't have to worry about them getting hung and getting killed in sundown towns because they melanated. Because remember, in the South, there was undeclared Seminole wars. We're still under those wars. And I know that's hard for us to kind of want to deal with that reality, but if the government never if it never declared war through its Congress from the 1800s, and it instituted an Indian Removal Act in the 1800s, does it make sense, y'all, why they would call it a Great Migration when people were hauling ass out of the South, going to New York, Chicago, LA, all over the damn place? No, that was actually war being waged on us.
What it sound like? It sound like a new aged or just a new version of what? The Trail of Tears. We got one in 1830. Now we're going to have one in 1960s. And now we have another one, 2023, through gentrification. Still war being waged, because again, seeing our people murdered every fiscal quarter. That's why when we put on the community post, we have some more murders, and we're seeing this, we're on the 12th week. So one more week, and that'll be the end of the first fiscal quarter. So you bet, you can rest assured there'll be more coming in the second quarter. And it's continuous until we do what we stated within those Marine historical points and actually, become, have the warriors become the leaders of our group. So again, like you stated, we'll be jumping into this Civil Rights Act of 1968, and I'm excited, man. So.
And I'm just curious, just the people that's in the chat, can you ask them, Chief Quietwater or Chief Biko, What are their thoughts on this? And do they see anything any different now that we've read the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which ended intense military occupation that they nicknamed Jim Crow? And now that we've read the 1965 Voting Rights Act, does anybody in the chat still believe that the Negro, Black, and colored specifically got anything in the 60s? Or were you just implying, and we've been walking in this make-believe world like the government did something specifically for us when it didn't? And here we are in 2023, still getting benign and neglected, and we scratching our heads like, how can this be? It goes back to the 60s. Actually, it goes back to the Indian Removal Act. Let me be correct. The moment that the Congress of the United States government voted to remove the American to quote unquote Indian territory, remember, we're under tribes and confederacies. We don't know that they voting this shit in. Okay. They never came to the leaders, stay with me, y'all. They never came to the leaders of the Choctaw, Chickasaw, and the different tribes and confederacies in the Southeast region of America. They never came to them and said, based on this disagreement, we're going to go to war with you. They never did that. We had our own government. They had theirs. They voted to remove us. They never declared war openly against us per natural law of government and procedure. So the killings, the hangings, the burning of the towns, we running around talking about racism. They had a whole removal act for your ass that they ran with that. The whole 1800s, the whole 1900s, up into the 1960s. Then they switch it, and through the media, how many wars have we lived through if you born from 1960 to now? War on poverty, war on drugs, war on crime. Who's that been against?
Us.
Anybody confused in the chat? Anybody got any pushback against the documents? This is why we have to look at people who look like us that have not done this. It's shameful that you got scholars and y'all don't tell us about American history when our grandparents are buried in this land, and our great-grandparents are buried in this land, and their parents are buried in this land, but you teaching me about motherfucking Africa. And I got 3 generations of family of grandparents buried in this land, and I don't know nothing about what happened. It's almost like, you niggas getting paid to sabotage your own
to keep us suppressed. Yeah. And they ain't got no shame in it. They have no shame. Yeah. Anybody in the chat have want to chime in?
Because this is our history, whether we, like I said, if you look like me and you got grandparents that's buried in this land and great-grandparents buried in this land, this your history. You had people living on this land through the civil rights era, and nobody talks about this. Nobody talks about the 1968.
And the fact that it's right, and just the fact that these are documents that can be pulled up, like we're not coming off the top of our head. A lot of this we've learned together throughout this whole process from the beginning up until now. I know 90% of it I definitely didn't know. I knew about treaties, but have never ever read treaties. But just from the beginning all the way up to now that we're coming closer to the end of this whole history lesson, it's just been, the picture has definitely been painted and is much clearer now. So you will know what to tell your kids, grandkids, so that at least with us and whoever is in this chat and agree with us, we can at least stop it with us, to change that narrative in regards to what your kids and grandkids and great-great-grandkids will know about what we went through, what we conquered, and who we were on this land. Can you go back to that document real quick, 1968 Indian Rights Act? Because at this point, can you pin it to the chat real quick, just so people can click on it? So, of course we'll do it every time, but at this point, the dam has been broken.
We need to be challenging everybody who look like us and ask the question, why did we never know about the 1968 Indian Rights Act? If you put in the word Indian one more time, and this document is, this whole act is strictly for the Indian. Just scroll down. Can you just scroll down? All of this is about Indians and Indian tribes, Indian government, this whole act. Why did we never know about this? Why wasn't the 1964 Civil Rights Act specific to the Black and Negro? If that's what we're showing our people. If you're not prisoners of war, why has the government never done what it did in the 1968 Act, Indian Rights Act? Because you're the Indian. Hello? 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 You the Indian. Again, the 1964 Civil Rights Act was to end intense military occupation to allow melanated people around the world to feel safe to become U.S. citizens. The 1965 Voting Rights Act was giving the world the right to vote once they become U.S. citizens. Oh yeah, let's get back to the American in the 1968 Indian Rights Act. So we're going to read this act and see if we can relate to it based on our own story on this land. And remember, the Exodus happened started in 1830 with the Indian Removal Act, when they started forcing a lot of our people into Oklahoma. We've never seen Congress write legislation specific to the Negro, Black, or color. So what we're showing you, those of us that are adults and got kids, stop using them damn words.
Yeah.
Fuck the etymology of it. You ain't got to go that deep. We started from the treaties that started the wars in the South on this channel. Now we're in the civil rights era. We have yet to see Negro, Black, and colored in any United States government document. Why the fuck you calling yourself Negro, Black, and colored? They've never recognized that. It's just that simple. Anybody in the chat not feeling where we coming from?
No, everybody pretty much agreeing in alignment.
Shit, the first, 18 pages of this Civil Rights Act of 1968 are about the Indians.
Hold on, start right there. You see where it says, oh, you scrolled up. See where it says urban development? Come on, man. Those are words those are key words for the hood, the ghetto. We're going to read this act and we're going to see, damn, is this us?
It literally, the page right after they stop talking about the rights of the Indian, they go straight into the fair housing. So Title 8, Title 8, fair housing. Everything else is about the Indian.
And we're going to put history together and we're going to put all of this together and we're going to make it make sense for ourselves. And again, we got to look at these people who are supposed to be our historic scholars. Yeah, the gig is up. The gig is up. It's time for us to awaken, man. We've been under this curse for too long. And the curse we're under is we suffer for lack of knowledge.
Right.
So shout out to everybody who's taking time to rock with us and read these documents so we can start putting these documents in people's faces, man. We ain't got to go back and forth and tongue wrestle with you motherfuckers, man. The documents say what the documents say. The United States government has never recognized Negro, Black, and colored. I'm not Negro, Black, and colored. Those need to be fighting words. Straight. Yeah, I'm not Negro, Black, and colored or Afro-American.
Yeah.
Take the Afro off, I'm American.
Yeah.
You are a U.S. citizen. And all you got to do to vet them is ask them a simple question. Where your grandma from? Where her mama from? At some point, they're going to get stuck. And they're going to say Pakistan, Italy, Spain. And then you have to stand up and adhere natural law and look them dead in the eyes and say, so you've been a United States citizen for 2 generations. Welcome to America. Welcome to my land. And that sounds so crazy when I just said that, right? But we are the American. Everybody else is a U.S. citizen. It's just that simple. Anything y'all want to say on that? It's just that simple.
No, shit.
Yeah, that sums it up.
Every time you go ahead and go in that package store, go ahead and ask them questions, man. with them gas stations, y'all. Hey man, where your family from?
Right. Mhm.
Ask them. They gonna tell you. They gonna tell you.
Say, oh, okay, you've been a U.S. citizen since the 1990s.
Huh?
And here's what y'all gonna realize when you do that. And I've never had this not happen. When you vet somebody like that and ask them where their grandparents and their great-grandparents from, and you realize and you vet them and realize that they're U.S. citizens, they're not American, they are not going to dishonor their bloodline. Once they realize that you know that you're American, that quote unquote white person, they will admit to you, yeah, I'm from Italy.
Mhm.
But they're going to look at you crazy when you say, okay, so you've been a U.S. citizen for 2 generations. Yeah, I'm Cherokee. Or I'm Choctaw. They're going to look at you. Where did you go to school? In other words, you're not supposed to know that.
Yeah.
Right.
Pay attention to that. When they vet us, they ask us, what's our religious belief and where'd you go to school? As soon as you start thinking out the box, because they're thinking, we've got the indoctrination locked down. You're not supposed to know that.
Exactly.
Where did you go to school? I'm of the school of Dr. Carter G. Woodson, where he says self-education is better than any school system.
Mhm.
You know, the same way Malcolm X learned in the prison, except you don't have to be in prison to be self-educated. You can discipline yourself and read on your own. Yeah, I come from that lineage. No degree, no piece of paper, just self-taught. Anything y'all want to share in closing?
That's about it. I think we have hit all the topics. Like I said, I'm excited for next week to get this document started. But thank you everyone in the chat that has tapped in, that's been coming in and interacting in the chat every week. Definitely appreciate it.
Sure, definitely shout out to all the chiefs in the chat. And yeah, I'm in agreement. I'm ready to jump into this 1968 act and like you said, see if it applies to us or see if we can find any commonalities within this document. Because yeah, it's about time we start standing on these documents and standing on the truth. Because like we said, it is what it is. You can't go against what's the documents. The documents speak for themselves. So yeah, I'm excited to jump into this, man.
Next week, 1968, Indian Civil Rights Act.